So I'm going to go forward. These are all the items that I put in there as possible topics, and I'm going to let you decide which ones you want to cover first. I'm going to break it into two sections. You probably can hardly read what's on this, but those were all the items that I put in the email last night. So I'm going to do it in two parts. We'll first go those first two that are there. We have, payroll, setting up pay types, deduction, benefits. We have all these items here. And I'm going to leave it to the class to say, hey, I would like to see some more information on select one of those topics. Or if you have something I didn't list, that let's try to keep it within the payroll banking part of it. And then the next section will be in the accounts receivable part of it. But if there's, you can either put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and say, hey, would you please show me? One of the options, I'm not new, but I'm not the expert in Zoom navigation, as you discovered last week. But we do have the ability that you can share your screen. So if there's something that you're doing in Classic that you have a hard time explaining and want to show it, we'll try to let you share your screen and you can show us. I just want you to be aware that if you do that, since this is being recorded, that you would want to make sure that you didn't bring up on screen any confidential information. And if it is something where you just have to do that, then I think maybe we could schedule a one-on-one to discuss that particular item if that's what it takes. So which topic will you pick? And if no one has any particular topic, I will just pick one and we will go into that particular category. So any requests on a particular topic to cover? Go ahead and put it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself and speak up. So direct deposit would be new for me. I'd love to see how it works. Okay, let's go ahead and go into the direct deposit. And what I will do also on that, okay, and I'll answer Barb's question then next. In terms of the direct deposit, this is the company we set up last week. And what will be involved is you would go into here, and I'm going to upload to the customer portal a document after the class on direct deposit, and you can log on to your customer portal and download that document. The way our direct deposit, we aren't providing the actual service. The direct deposit would be done through your bank. And there's some initial steps in the getting it set up in the bank. And what you'll first do is you'll go into setup, and this is what will be covered in the setup document is, and you'd want to work with your typically it's where you go if you don't want to show all the social security numbers. This section here needs to be filled out, and this deals with the routing, the bank routing number, the bank's account number, which bank. This is all information that we'll need to get from the bank to fill this out. And usually there's someone at the bank who monitors the online banking. And the way most people are operating is we generate with our program a notcha file, which is the standardized file for like ACH payments, but it's also for ACH payroll. And that file is typically uploaded via internet banking or through your bank. There's different procedures in the upload of that ACH file from bank to bank, but they're more verification for security reasons. And they do a check on the file to make sure it is compliant with the notcha format. So this information would be set up first. And then not every employee necessarily has to have direct deposit, but where you would go to set it up to say miscellaneous, you would come into here and there's a box down here that says direct deposit. And so here's where you would go in and you would fill in the routing number for that of your bank. And so it's a 9-digit number. And you would need to, is it going to be a checking account or savings account? And, I'm sorry. Bank name. And there's where it was. The bank routing number, and that'd be the routing number of the employee's check. They'll give you their ideally a voided check of the account they want their account put into, and then this would be their bank account number. And then it's just going to be automatic. Typically, it's done as a flat amount, but we do have in our system the ability to have more than one bank account. Some employees would like to have like $50 of their net check deposited into their savings account, and so down here you could put in a and in this case typically it would be maybe a savings account, and you would still put in the routing number of that employee's bank, and then this is going to be the savings account number, and they want $50 put in there. So this is set up. What this is going to do is it's on the net check that's going to be direct deposited. It's going to take the $50 and put it in the savings account, subtract that 50 from the net check, and put the balance into their primary checking account. But you can set up another bank account if you wish. So again, not everyone is going to necessarily have it. I mean, some make it a policy that you have to use direct deposit, but in some cases they have employees that don't have bank accounts, so you can't always force it that way. So that's what you do in the way of set up the employee. So once it's set up that way, then when you go to process payroll, you would go in to run a payroll, and you're going to do everything just like you'd done before. But it's going to know that when you go to create checks, it's going to know that some of them are going to get direct deposit and some of them are going to be computer checks. And so in this screen, you can see now that we have two different sets of check numbers. So those with a computer check aren't getting direct deposit. You're going to start with that check number, and they're going to get assigned in that sequence of check numbers. And those who are set up for direct deposit, we're using other as the check number, and then we assign a separate check number for the direct deposits. And then we proceed to create the checks, which is the same. I need to go fill the setup before I could really process that. But then once you've created the checks, you'd be able to go into the direct deposit, and there would be an item here, and depending on your bank's criteria, sometimes we have to add a 1 in front of the tax ID number. These are one of the variables from bank to bank of what they use as the number. I've run into banks that used a totally different number, and we can set it up that way. But in most banks, they want your tax ID number as part of the setup that I showed you in the beginning, and they want a 1 put in front of it. I don't know why that is, but that's just the way a lot of them are. And then once that's done, you would go in and you would create the ACH file, and that would be the file that you upload to the bank. And in the reports, you'll always have the ability to print out a report of each direct deposit that would itemize all the people getting a direct deposit. And it's basically recapping what's on the ACH file that you're going to upload to your bank. Those who do get the direct deposit, you can go into pay run reports, and you can pull up a pay run. And if you've been doing direct deposits, they're not getting a check, so you can print the pay stubs here, And the pay stub is going to be like a check. It'll have a body of a check with a net check. It'll have a pay stub like a regular paycheck, but on the other stub, there is a breakdown of the last 4 digits of each bank account that has a deposit. So it's just one, it'll show last 4 digits of that and the amount that was deposited, which would be the net check. Or if there was more than one deposit, it would have the net check after, it would have the $50 like I did with the one employee with the last 4 digits, and then it would have the balance of the net check. So the two would add up to the net check that's displayed in the check section of the computer or of the report. And so that would, like I said, I'll upload the direct deposit document to the portal, where that's probably what he wanted to take to the bank and talk to them and say, I need you to provide me this information. And what the bank charges you is going to vary from bank to bank. Some banks don't charge anything because of the service that you have with that particular bank. Other banks will charge a monthly fee, and so you'll just have to double check what the bank is going to charge to actually process that direct deposit. So hopefully that gave you at least a little bit of idea how to do the setup, and we can recover this one a little bit further after we've got that document out, and that might be one of those things that you'll want to use some of your support time that you've got with your upgrade purchase. So unless there's some other information, hopefully Melissa, that gave you what you were wanting to look at. Barb's bringing up, after I entered my first paper, while I was not able to click, it said there are no pay items. Okay, what you probably need to do is make sure we say next pay run, and this is grayed out. But when you go to enter pay run, if you're weekly, I think you were weekly, Barb, you would want to make sure this is set to yes. And then when you go into enter pay data, it must be blank in your particular screen. And so my little bars in the way here. So you would go in there and pull up the employee, our weekly number of hours. Then you would go down to we only have one employee in here in this particular company. Let me just switch over to this one here. Christine, are you seeing the switch of the companies here? I want to make sure I didn't lose my share like I did last week.
No, well, we see your screen, but I see the same company. We're still viewing your screen.
Okay, so I'll go back into run a payroll. And so in this particular case, okay, we're on one-time adjustments. I will exclude that one and just say we're in the weekly, go into here. And you're probably hit blank when you're getting there if they're saying there's no items to calculate. So you would come in here, and this is where you would select each employee, and and if somebody does have overtime, if you've screened it out like I have done with a lot, I have L aluminum in here, but if for some reason this week macaroni had overtime, you could come down here and select macaroni and select overtime, and you could go in ahead and put in the amount of hours of overtime that person had. You can see they're separated, but if that's the way it's going to be going forward, once you exit this screen and go back into it, it's going to resort it and group them together so that the hour overtime is the same. So if you want, for a lot of you, maybe the hours rarely change going from week to week. So if you want, you can go up once you've said next pay run and came up here, you can go ahead and set everything to 0 and basically start over. And so in this case, I'm just going to say he only worked 25 hours this week and didn't work overtime, and 40. So the hours, when we set up the pay type, we say each hour represents 1. And so the quantity, I mean, it makes more sense on the salary. You only put a quantity of 1 for the salary, but it's still going to put in 40 hours. And those are for workman's comp reports where you need to report the amount of hours people worked. And on a salary, we just say for every pay period, our hours worked are X. And so you would work from there. And we'll just, and so anyway, I think, Barb, you just need to go in and get those information in like that. And then when you click done, and then when I had already calculated this, so I need to do a recalculate. And then you would go to calculate. And why are we getting, oh, I forgot to say include. That might be why you're getting that message as well, is you don't have your weekly group included. And then when you click calculate, and well, that's good that I help someone do an annual. So you do have to make sure that the weekly or whatever pay frequency that you use is set here. And now it should go ahead. So it's kind of good we ran into those two things, so you know which things that might be. And then you would have your pay calculation to review and make sure everything looks good. And if everything looks good, then you can go ahead and click create checks. So do you think that answered your question, Barb? Okay, well, I'm going to move on. There's a couple of people that want to look at the Micker check printing. So let me see here. Which one should we do that? Let's just go back to that one we set up last week. Where did it go? It's this one. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. So we'll just go into the banking for this customer. So you go into the bank accounts and you would select the bank you want to set it up. So we'll just say that one that we have in here. We've already been writing checks and so forth, and now we're going to start using your check numbers. And again, there's a document that I can upload on this as well. Most of the time, I mean, you don't have to do this, but if you want it to show on the check, you'd put in an address for the bank. And the ABA number, there's a fraction on your pre-printed checks, like 72/739, or it might be 72-103/739. I mean, you can do that. You can put in the routing number. These aren't absolutely critical. As far as the Micker check printing, what's critical is this line down here. And so you have symbols that show up on your check. And the first section of the check are that's the routing number. And so if you see here, the capital A, so I'm doing a shift, capital A, we'll put in this symbol. And then it's going to be the 9-digit routing number. Oops. And then you put capital A again. So that's your routing number. And then typically there's a space And again, you can look right at the checks, pre-printed checks you have, and whether it's a personal check or a prior pre-printed check. You'll look on here, and typically, sometimes there might be a symbol to start with, but usually it's just the account number. And then you want the on us symbol, which is the C, capital C. So that's ship C. So that's what you do to get it ready to be set up. Now, when you go into the banking and you go into checks, and we're just going to create a new check. And it's going to be a computer check, obviously. And we do still want to verify that's the number you want, because if you're switching from a pre-printed check, you may have to go in and reset this. So verify, because you can change that number right at this point in time. And then you put in whatever the amount of the check is going to be, and you would select that way advances. So that's probably not typically what you would do. But then when you go to, you would post it, which basically saves it, post it to the GL. But when you go to print, you'll want to go over to the format tab. And here's what's pre-printed, and here's the blank check stock. And here is also where you choose the style of check. Since you're on classic, it's middle check. So most of you are used to the middle check. And then you want to make sure this box is checked so that it actually prints that MICR check printing. And then if there's some other settings here, if you do require more than one signature, or you want a message above your signature line, those can be put in as part of the setup. But then it's all set up. And so now it's when you go to print, it's going to go ahead and print that MICR information, just like you normally would with pre-printed checks. And it's going to send it to the printer. But then you'll see on the bottom of the check, you see on the bottom of the check is that information I entered in the MICR check printing, and then that should be the check that comes out with that and can be used on blank stock. Now, my experience has been some people want their main bank account to be on pre-printed checks, but they have maybe 2 or 3 other bank accounts that they write maybe 10 checks a year on or something like that, and they don't really want to buy a 500 checks. They're going to last them for the next 10 years. And if they have 2 or 3 bank accounts like that, it's like, well, that's where I can just use the blank check stock for both of those accounts. And the cost of blank check stock is a lot less. If you're needing to get some blank check stock, there is a link down here that will take you to the choice forms, and you can order blank check stock, as well as the double windowed envelopes that would match when you go to print this particular check. So again, there's a document that I can upload to there, but that's kind of a quick run through. So is there any other questions on that particular topic? Okay, let's see what's other time. Let me look at the chat, see if there's any other items. Direct deposit, MICR check printing. Any other suggestions? Otherwise, we'll go back to our list. As it applies to payroll or the banking checkbook, is there some new questions here? I think I will just jump into the vendor processing, because we're actually adding some of the 1099s this year that we haven't had in past years. And so in terms of setting up your 1099s, you're going to want to go into Let's go. We're in accounting already. Oh, there's some of you are going to be on basic because you just use it for payroll and checkbook accounting, and some of you are going to have the Premier because you use accounts receivable. This menu we have here is the Premier, and that's what you all have right now until you activate permanently. But if you're going to get basic, this vendor will show up in your banking menu for setting up new vendors. Now the conversion is bringing over everybody that's in your classic. And so you can go ahead and pull up a particular one, and you can change the default expense account here. But in reference to the 1099s, you would come here and you would select, okay, what 1099 do I send this particular person? 90% of them are going to be the NEC, non-employee compensation. But you may, I know a number of our users also have to submit a 1099 for their rent, and then that's the most common one. But royalties and other income that don't fall into the NEC, non-employment compensation. And then there's I don't know how many of you use it in your classic program, but there is an interest set up on here. So you decide which one they apply to. And so for this, I'll just set up NEC. And so now it's going to track everything for the NEC for at the end of the year. Now I get the question once in a while, well, sometimes I write a check to this particular individual that's not a non-employee compensation, might be a reimbursement, or maybe they bought something from you or something, or you bought something from them, and they don't want it to apply. What we usually recommend is if you've set them up for a 1099 and you don't want a particular check to go to this, I would just put in there like Smith, Arnie when you cut that check. Because one of the things that you do have the ability to do, you don't have to, if you're doing accounts payable, you can come in here and just generate the check. And so to make sure they don't get that, you would just type in, last name, just a different way to signify the check as not get attached to that supplier's vendor. And then you can go ahead and just, if it's a reimbursement for something or some other type of transaction, then it's going to get expensed differently and it won't show up in your 1099 at the end of the year here. So we post that. And so then at the end of the year, we'll go ahead and you'll be able to go into our 1099s. And I don't know if we have the federal ID, but if you don't have the federal ID set up on there, when you go to create the 1099s, I didn't give them enough. You have to have $600. I'll just change this to 0, but $600 is the IRS minimum. And now it created that 1099, but it's reminding me I didn't get a ID number for them, whether it's a social security number, if it's an individual, or if it's a federal ID number, if they're a Schedule C. My understanding is you do not generate, if they're a corporation, you don't have to send them a 1099. But double check with your accountant on that. So, and then from here, you would go to the e-file portal and you would upload the file. And once uploading, you'll be able to review the 1099s. Also, our W-2s are done through the Safe Choice e-file portal. And we'll be having, they just announced the new update for the e-filing. And one of our later sessions this quarter will actually go into walking through the process of uploading to the e-file portal and processing and showing where the history is, because you do save the history on the portal. And the e-file portal is different than the customer portal. I mean, we should still be able to go here and export. And it's just telling me it isn't going to want to go, but once you go, this is going to take you to the e-file portal, and then from here we do the processing. So that brought us up into here, but we're done with our processing, and then it's going to take us back to the main accounting. Okay. Now we're 30 minutes into our class session. I told you in the email last night, I'm going to try to keep these sessions to 60 minutes. So let's maybe go back to our list of items that we could possibly cover. If there isn't anything else on this list or something that pertains to payroll and the checkbook, I'll go on and we can move on to the next section. And we see the other ones here, so I'll go ahead and. So in this section, I mean, the chart of accounts that you have in People's Choice Classic is being copied, and so this is already set up. But if you want to make some changes to your chart of accounts, I can show you how to do that. There are ways, if you are using the accounting and you have an income statement and balance sheet, and you'd like to have it in a particular format and it's not coming out in that format, there are tools to go ahead and create subtotals on certain sections of your chart of accounts. Some of you might have on a budget, there is a full budgeting feature within the program. I mean, there was a budget feature within People's Choice Classic. Few more different formats available in that regard. Obviously, if you're using accounting, you're going to need to create a journal entry. Pretty straightforward, but we could cover that. If you wanted to look at the activity of a particular account, I can show you how you can kind of audit a particular account. I could go over the most common reports. I mean, the most common reports are typically the balance sheet and income statement that are done on a monthly basis. But a lot of people also print a trial balance. A lot of people would like a general ledger report that has the detail. There is a transactional report. What we could do, I think I set up. So I'm going to jump this one back to, let's just double check what was the date I had on here. So I'm going to use this one here. So the check date was 8/20. So if I wanted a general ledger summary of the 8/20 payroll, and this would be a tip, is if you are only using People's Choice for payroll and the totals are being put into a different system, here's where you can go and generate a summary total to be used as a journal entry in another system. And when we get into accounting, you would go to reports. You would go down to accounting reports. And here's where the balance sheet, the budget listing, the budget, these are the ones that I was talking about. But in our particular one, what I'm talking about is this transaction journal summary report. And if we want it for only 8/20, and we go to the advanced, and this can be done. I mean, this is going to show us if you did it as a detail, it's going to show you each detailed general ledger. I selected the summary version up there. So, and I only want it on my payroll. That you can do it by employee, but you want to do it as a issued payroll check, and you can click print. And it gives you a debit and credit summary of that pay run in terms of, and then if you've set up your chart of accounts to match whatever chart of accounts it's going into it for another system, and that might be a reason that you would want to modify your chart of accounts, is if there's a different chart of accounts in the other one. It's like, well, let's go back and edit these numbers so they match up. And so that would be there, but then this would be the journal entry for that 820 payroll that could be put into another system. But it also gives you this is a excellent report for really generating, especially if you went into the detail. So if I did the detail transaction report for this month, I could go into advanced, and if I just wanted the payroll, I could do that. But if I wanted it for everything, I could just leave this as is. And it's going to generate a report of every posting that you've done to the general ledger for that particular pay period. I should probably have gone ahead and made what we could do is this year. And then you're going to get everything, not just payroll in this regard, if you're using the system for a number of things. So it really allows you to drill down to specific posting using that report, as opposed to the general ledger report, which is something that you typically accountants want, especially at the end of the year, or if you're doing an audit. You said this year you can come into here and you can do every account for the whole year, like I selected, or if you only want to look at a particular general ledger account, you could just go into, say, I just want to look at my checking account. Then you could select that, and that's the only thing that is going to put in the report. If you uncheck this, then you could just do it with a range of reports. But the nice thing about the pick and choose is sometimes you don't want a range. You want account 4,000 and 4,500 and 4,800, but you don't want any of the accounts in between those. And so that's available with this pick and choose as far as which accounts you're reporting on. But I'm just going to pretend that it's the end of the year. I want to give everything out. So we would click there. And so this is every transaction that went through our checking account. Let's go to the last page in the report. So, typically this report's going to be fairly large, and just our demo company, it's still 44 pages, but it shows like all the activity that's gone through a particular GL account. Many accountants like to have this exported, and so you can go up here on a print preview, and you can export this to a file, give it the file name, and it's going to export it as an Excel file. That same export is available for Word or a PDF. If you're going to print it as a PDF, but you don't want all 44 pages, I don't select that one. What you'd want to do is from here, go to print, and then you would select your Microsoft to PDF, and then come down here and say, I only want page 23 or 23 through 25, or whatever range of pages you want, versus printing the whole page. But typically, if it's the whole year, we don't print it. It's typically just exported to Excel or exported to a PDF or Word. But Excel accountants like, because then they can massage some of the data and do some other analysis. Okay. So was that useful for anybody? Maybe for Dan. He's one of our accountants on the call here today. So any other things that you might want to look at in the way of the accounting reports? Unlike People's Choice Classic, you can only print trial balance as of the end of the month. You can't do a mid-month trial balance. With PCA Desktop, you can print a trial balance as of any date. I can pick, last month on the 20th, what was my trial balance then? And you just go to here, and you're going to get your trial balance up here, and it's going to be as of that particular date. That's quite often useful when we're trying to verify our balances with the bank journals. The bank balance and at any particular day and the trial balance for that bank account on any particular day should always match up. And if they're not matching up, then some of those audit tools is what we determine, or maybe we got started out wrong. But those are some of the things. I mean, I went through last week the reports that I want you to print to verify. Well, I actually do all that before I deliver the converted data to you, because I want to make sure that we've caught everything. But there's always a chance that maybe we missed something in that regard. And after you do some analysis, like, wait a minute, this didn't look right. And so that's why we still would want you to do that. Okay, so we're getting back to here. Is there any other accounting things here? Some of you that aren't using accounting or aren't using accounts receivable, I mean, you could go ahead and drop off the call if none of this applies to you, unless there's something that you thought of that you want to go back to the payroll or the banking module. Otherwise, see here, any other requests? And then you want to go over closing. Okay, that's a good question. Let me go into here. Closing's a little different. You're not forced to close like you are in People's Choice Classic. Typically, the setup process here is you set up all your financial periods, where Classic makes you create one new financial period month to month. Typically, we create the whole year. And so like when you get in 12 next year, and you can do it now if you want to, but you would come in here and advance to the 2024. And most of the time you go down here for new comment periods, and it'll just say copy the previous year's periods. Sorry, my phone's ringing, but I will hang it up. So, and then these are all open. So going back to the question on closing, it's not going to let me close anything here until everything's closed. Well, we just started this company in 2023. So as far as closing, you can go in here and just hit here, say close period. And if this comes up, that means, oh, wait a minute, you don't have everything posted, and you don't want to close until everything is posted. But what that does is it prevents you, once it's closed, then you can no longer post to that period. And so that rule is a little different than the way People's Choice Classic operates. And so in most cases, not always, but in most cases, we leave all the periods open all year long. And then at the end of the year, we'll go ahead and close. Now, some will go ahead, I've reconciled, it balances. I don't want anybody, especially if you're multi-user, multiple people are entering transactions, you don't want them to post to January anymore. So you would close that so they couldn't close it. And then when you get to the end of the year and close, then that's when it actually closes the year and posts your profit or loss to your retained earnings account. you wouldn't do it in this year, you would do it through this year first. In terms of, it was kind of good that I got that, because if you went to close a period and it's saying, oh, there's two transactions that I haven't posted yet, here's where you would go to. You would go back to here, you could go into reports, you could go into accounting reports, and down the last ones are unposted bank account transaction, unposted bills, and unposted invoices. For those of you that are just using payroll and accounting and not accounts receivable or accounts payable, this is the only thing that really applies. And so we can do a preview and it's showing us all the transactions that haven't been posted. And so what we would want to do in this case, let me just see here. Let's just look at that again. We're trying. So we'll just have these two January ones. So we can close just these, or post these two and close January and still not have done these. And so I will go ahead and the way you would do that, you would go to banking and you go to bank batch posting, and you would pick the bank account that hasn't been posted, and you can see these are the ones that I haven't posted yet. And so I want to make sure I get these two here posted, and one didn't post, and so we'll go drill down, and the reason that one didn't post is we hadn't assigned it to a GL account. So I'm going to go ahead and just assign it to that account and post it. So now that we've posted those two January transactions, then we should be able to go back to accounting, go back into financial periods, and close why didn't it close for me? Sorry. My bad. I shouldn't have created that 2024, but anyway, it would get marked as closed. I'll have to go back and figure out what I did wrong there. I probably shouldn't have created that year, but it shouldn't still prevent me from closing. So I'm a little puzzled by that particular one. So Dan, did you want to go back and see the actual closing of the end of the year? I might have to revisit that in terms of I'd get a batch updated where I had the whole year closed. And so it's only when you go to close the last month of the fiscal year, whether it's on a calendar fiscal year or some other fiscal year, then it prompts you that you got to post to your retained earnings account. Okay, so we'll back up here. There was another question that came in. Do invoices have a limited number of entries or lines? Can invoices be multiple pages? Yes, they can be multiple pages. I do believe there is a limit, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I know you can have at least 30 or 40 items on an invoice, but I'll have to go back and revisit that to know what that limit is. I haven't had that question posed for quite a while. But Melissa, since you're one that asked that, I mean, do you know how many pages? Have you run into a limit in Classic? I don't even remember if there was a limit in Classic. And some of it will depend on the limit is on the number of lines that each item is. So some people have a description where maybe, it's almost like a paragraph in the description. And that's going to take up some space on the invoice. And so the number I don't think it's limited by the number of items per se. I think it's limited by the number of lines of printed text on there. But you do run into a limit in Classic. Okay. I might want to review that with you, Melissa, one-on-one, and I can do some research and get back to you. Let me make a note of that. Okay. Any other questions in that? Otherwise, we still have 10 minutes left here. Anything else that would come into play? Generating late charge, sending statements, emailing statements. We could have a whole separate section on emailing statements. I will just jump into where the setup needs to be done. But which internet provider and so forth does make a difference. But in the setup, on the initial setup, you go into company program settings. And then you go into email settings. And this is where, you would select which provider you use for your email. And I just got notice here recently on another matter that I believe it's both Google and Microsoft are changing some of the email rules. I mean, this can be considered marketing emails, and there's some rules that you have to follow. And one of them that we've done with is a pause between each one, because if you send out like 500 in 5 minutes, it's going to go, oh, this looks like a spam, and a lot of them will stop it, and so you'll need to do pause. But anyway, you will get these settings, and so you might need to work with your IT or whoever has set up your email and the internet provider to get this particular information. So this is the information that would need to be set up. You can have a default subject, but you can always override that, confirm. And do you want to send it from a company email address, or if you have multiple users, do you want to have the user's return email address on a particular one? Most of them just have a company one. And then when you're invoicing and you go into here and go to invoices and you pull up an invoice, down here when you go to print, here's where you can select that you want to email it, or maybe you want to print and email it. And it's going to go to the email address that's here. This could be filled in in the customer setup, and you can double click here and put in an email address. So I reselected it, and you see it filled out my email address. But you can also one-time it. I cannot store it in there, but you could put in here, but I want to copy it to another email address. And you can blind copy it. And so you typically are going to post it, and then you're going to, like I said, when you go to email, instead of printing or print preview, you would click the email. So I don't have it set up, so I won't, but otherwise, like what you're used to doing is it's still going to go ahead and give the print preview and then click print. And then as far as the statements go, when you go to generate statements, oops. you have a similar option where if you're going to email, you would select there will be included. And so we don't have it set up, and I'll give you that list, and then you can actually pick and choose which ones you want to email. And in terms of how you want it sorted, you can sort your statements, and this is true whether it's email or print. My first name, company name, or last name, first name. So that was kind of a quick overview on that. There's probably going to be a new document on updating that, since some of the things have changed, but our local phone company hosts our email. That's where you may need to get your IT involved to help on that. And email Hotmail office. It's an STMP, and I'll double check with programming on that. Hosts our email. And I know what some have done is they've gone ahead and set up a Gmail account and used it just for sending out statements. One of the nice, if you're going to be just sending a lot, versus if you have a regular email account and separating it from that. So if you do get recognized as spam, it's better that it's done on a Gmail account that you can change versus your main account that you have to go through some procedures to get off a blacklist. Again, this might be something that you'll want to use some of your support time and coordinate it with your local phone company or any other provider that you might have. While we're approaching our 2 o'clock time, we could actually handle one more question if there's any other questions. I think I caught everybody here. So again, this is being recorded and I will be uploading. Hopefully everybody's been getting the replays with the reminder emails. If you're not getting those, please let me know. Just send a message to the support request for that PCC to PCA support. And again, we're going to try and take this format going from week to week. I will be picking some particular formats, mainly from requests from you to say, would you please cover this next week? And if you send those in advance, then I'll be able to get a little more detailed prepared, and that we can really do a deep dive into a particular something. Okay, Melissa. Yes, I did send out it was separate from the reminder email. I'll go back, but it basically had the agenda that I had that I was listing right here. It was basically had this information on that we went through with both that and that were included in that email, and I just reprinted them here. But so I encourage, after you've watched this week and how we handled these things, this is going to be the format going forward. I'm going to be, as I mentioned, incorporating potential other users who weren't necessarily coming from People's Choice Classic, but either were new. And office hours are going to be a weekly occurrence for all licensed users, that we will take up this kind of a format. And once we get closer towards the end of the year into December, we'll probably put some specific class together on generating the 1099s, getting a little more depth in that, and also generating the W-2s. And so, but if there's like someone who's like, yeah, I want to see more on the email, I'd probably bring our programmer in on that one, so that he can elaborate a little bit on how he's dealt with some of the security problems that people have with sending emails out. And so I'll check, Melissa, on your why you didn't get that email. You might yeah, check your junk. It may have gone into there, or I'll just make sure that I'm using the right email address for you. So otherwise, unless there's any other questions, we covered some pretty good stuff this week. Again, I'll get the recording out to you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.